Everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tim Talks Music. I'm Tim Butler, and today we have another music interview for you. The other day, I had the pleasure of talking to local alt-rock icon John Faye. John has been in the music industry for over 30 years and was signed to A&M Records with his band The Caulfields, and he even wrote his own book. So, I hope you enjoy my interview with John Faye, and thank you so much for all the support on my interviews. So, what is your earliest music memory?
That's a great question. I actually document that fairly deeply in this thing sitting here. Um, it dates back to when I was an extremely young child. But in a nutshell, the memory is hearing my sisters, older sisters, and their friends singing a version of Sloop John B., which is a song it's a folk song, but it was made famous by the Beach Boys on their album Pet Sounds. But they were singing it in Korean, and it's just such a vivid memory that I've had from way, way back. And I didn't even ultimately learn how to speak Korean, but I knew how to sing that version of it just phonetically from hearing it. So I think the thing that I find very interesting about the experience is that it's really the melody of the song that became so embedded in my mind. And I think that that's, if you talk about things like musical DNA and very early influences, that's probably ground zero of my musical DNA.
And would you say Brian Wilson has kind of influenced you in a way with your music?
I would say maybe not directly that much. I think, again, like his sense of melody and arrangement are things that I try to glean from their work. I wouldn't say that my stuff is nearly as harmonically complicated as his stuff. I mean, some of those songs, and that's part of why I love the Beach Boys so much, is that I listen to a song like God Only Knows. And, with a lot of, rock and pop songs, I can hear something and kind of instinctively know, oh, they did this to get that sound. And that songs that he wrote, especially during that era, are so otherworldly to me that they're mysterious. Like I can't deconstruct them in any meaningful way. Like I couldn't just be like, oh, here are the chords and here's how these parts work together. So he's one of the very few songwriters and arrangers that kind of do that for me, where it's like I can't even figure this out, but it's so unspeakably beautiful and complex. And so I would say his influence is aspirational and very much like those elements, like I said, melody and arrangement are the things that I really love so much about Brian Wilson.
And how did you start singing?
How did I start singing? I would say in some ways through necessity, because my first band started in high school. I was the drummer, and I had a little bit of a rotating cast of friends who I played with, but the main couple of people that I played with, one of them was sort of like the de facto lead singer. He's the guitar player, he should sing. And over time, I was sort of quietly singing along to records in my room at home, and I started to develop the ability to sing harmony. I developed the ability to project. And so at a certain point, like my background vocals were sort of surpassing his lead vocals. And at a certain juncture, It was like, you should be the lead singer. So it wasn't something that I necessarily aspired to at first. I just wanted to make noise and play drums and have fun. But over time, I just got an interest in singing. Plus, I was trying to be a songwriter. So naturally, you want to sing your own songs. So that's kind of where it began, probably high school.
And your first band is Beat Clinic, right?
That was my first serious band. So if you want to trace that back even further, the Beat Clinic emerged from a band that started out as the Suburban Lizards. We played one show. Then that morphed into a group called No Excuse, which actually played shows around Delaware and at University of Delaware, where we all attended. And maybe after about close to a year of playing under that name, we changed it to the Beat Clinic, which then there was a thread here. Eventually, that band became the Caulfields because there was enough crossover in personnel where it's just like, I look at my entire musical life as just one long thread.
And WMMR was the first to play one of your songs, I think, one of Beat Clinic's songs, I think you mentioned.
Yes, so there was a program on WMMR in the 80s called Street Beat, and it was hosted by a lovely woman named Cindy Drew, and she would play Philadelphia area bands, and Delaware was included in that. And so I do think that we probably got a couple of spins on the college radio station at Delaware prior to that, but like any kind of like big commercial station, that was the first time.
And what was your reaction to being signed to A&M with the Caulfields?
I broke out into these sores at first. No, my reaction was, I mean, I don't think it can be described in one emotion even. I mean, obviously there's elation, like everything you've worked for up to that point is being recognized in a way that you dreamed about. There was also shock, you know, the Caulfields maybe hadn't been around under that name for very long once that started to happen, but most of us who were in the band had been playing together for almost 10 years by that point. And we, in many ways, were starting to become discouraged right around the time our fortunes started to turn around. So to go from, you know, maybe being 6 months from like breaking up and changing what our focuses were in life to being signed to a label that, you know, I owned lots of records put out on that label, like some of my favorite bands, you know, like the Police and Joe Jackson, and even dating back to when I was little, like, you know, the Carpenters and, you know, Cat Stevens and all these artists that my sisters listened to. Mm-hmm. This was a big deal to me. So it was a lot of different feelings that I had.
And one of the songs that really took you into the mainstream was Devil's Diary. How did that come about? And
how did the song come about, or how did you,
like, what was the writing process for that?
Okay, well, that's got a very entertaining story. I was working what ended up being the last sort of menial job that I ever did before turning pro as a musician. And I was I think the official title was assistant groundskeeper. So not just a groundskeeper, the assistant groundskeeper. And so I had to do like the worst jobs that nobody else wanted to do. I cleaned like chicken houses that hadn't been shoveled in years, and this was on a big estate in Delaware, so it had many, many acres of grass that needed to be mowed. So long story short, I wrote the chorus of Devil's Diary while cutting grass on a riding mower. So I guess the takeaway from that is it's not always just sitting in a room with an instrument. A lot of times it's within the context of you living your life that song ideas come from. And I was basically at a very low point when the line "I'm bigger than Jesus now" could not have been meant more ironically in my head than when I came up with it, because I was really taking stock of my life. When you're on a lawnmower for like an hour with the sun beating down and all you see in front of you is more grass to cut, that's the moment when you say to yourself, boy, you're doing great, man. You're bigger than Jesus now, And so that's how the genesis of the song came about, if I may. Pun intended, I guess. I don't know.
And John Lennon got slammed for saying that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus.
He did.
And
Yeah.
what was the reaction to your song when that happened?
It was a combination of things. In the 90s, I think there was more of an appetite for that kind of like lyrical attitude in songs. I think that a lot of people embraced it because they thought it was like, I don't know what they thought, but they liked it. But of course, in certain circles, it got some backlash. There's a reason why we played to 2 people in Salt Lake City, but there a lot of the country or the modern rock radio stations throughout the country really embraced the song. So it was kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I could second guess all kinds of decisions throughout my major label career, and Devil's Diary being the lead single from our first record, you only get one chance to make a first impression. The band was honestly shocked that the label suggested that. But I think it was the times. It's like, what's gonna stir up the most attention and possibly negative attention, but all press is good press is how the attitude went.
And then while you were touring with the Caulfields, there's a story that you mentioned in your book that really stood out to me, where you had an encounter with David Duke.
Yes.
And for the people who don't know who that is, could you explain who it is and what the experience was like? And, what was going through your head?
Duke is a guy from Louisiana who was a former Grand Wizard of the KKK, which is a terrorist group. And at that time, he had transitioned into politics. It's very much a sort of a precursor to where we're at now. It's like people that hold these extreme views somehow worm their way into mainstream ways of getting their ideas across. And he was kind of one of the first people that I was aware of that actually was able to do that. Now, Louisiana is a deep South state, and I think that he was able to, I don't think he won many elections, but he was certainly in the mix, all that. But bottom line, he showed up to our show, and when we were told that he wanted to see us, I mean, we were, can I say bricks on this show?
I can bleep it out.
Okay. It was really scary. But one of the things that is kind of instructional from that story is that I hold myself accountable today for not really reacting in the way that my gut told me I should have reacted. Because I think at that time, you're in a band that's just trying to make it. And we basically, so instead of coming to our show to give a shit about Devil's Diary, he actually said that his daughter really loved the band and he was there to get our autographs, which is insane. And we ended up giving that to him, which I regret, because it was kind of like co-signing the fact that, like, well, he's a hateful person, but he just wants an autograph. So just, and we wanted the situation to be over.
Right. Yeah.
Also. So I think I have sort of held that in my mind for a lot of years, and because there's all of these questions even today, like, well, what would you do in that situation? And I guess you can't really say unless you're in the situation. But I don't think anybody in our band is proud of how that played out, but on the other hand, it's like you're doing a very rapid calculation in your head. Like, if we tell David Duke to, like, get out of here, we're, like, literally in, like, the smallest backwoods club in Louisiana. Like, how's that going to end for us,
Right, yeah.
So it was just like, let's just sign it and hopefully it'll go away, which he did. So
After the Caulfields ended, you did John Fay Power Trip, and my first introduction to you was my dad playing John Fay Power Trip
Wow.
in many car rides.
your dad was one of the big supporters, early adopters of the John Fay Power Trip, and I have to tip my cap. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. And then after that, I found Parallel Universe in my grandparents' basement in their CD collection, and they had it for all these years. And I'm like, hey, can I listen to it? And they were like, sure. And so
I went straight to the basement, that box, that one. Yeah.
And then how did John Fay Power Trip turn into Ike?
That's actually kind of a cool story. When the Caulfields ended, and I was sort of at this crossroads of, like, all right, I've been doing this already for over 10 years. I had this experience that you dream of happening. Like, is that it? Did I reach the pinnacle of whatever it was I was going to achieve? And are my best days behind me? That's kind of like what I was pondering. And when I was sort of at that point, my mom really kind of gave me this pep talk, which she was not a pep talk kind of lady that I had experienced up to that point. And she really encouraged me to keep going, even though, like, the whole time I was in my music career, I could tell she was scared for me. Because she was a Korean immigrant. Like, she didn't come from a culture where your kid just is like, I'm going to play rock and roll. Go ahead. Like, it was always like, what's going to happen to this kid?
Right.
And so for her to have seen my work and work ethic over time and then encourage me to keep going, that was huge. And so I kind of decided, okay, well, I'm not going to do like a band thing anymore. It's just going to be me. It's going to be under my name. I'm going to call all the shots. This is not a democracy anymore. And so that's how the John Fay Power Trip project and album kind of came about. But what ended up happening is the people that I was playing with, which was Cliff Hillis, Dave Anthony, and Joanne Schmidt, who all were doing the touring that John Fay Power Trip was doing, it started to feel a lot more like a band than I ever intended. And then when we went in to actually record Parallel Universe, the initial idea was it's going to be the second John Fay Power Trip album. And our producer, this guy from Georgia, Don McCollister, just in the middle of the sessions, just blurted out, you should really change the name to a band. Like, unsolicited opinion. But we were like, all right, we'll think about it. And it was, conversations had to be made, like, okay, if we call this a band, what does that mean internally? And what it ended up ultimately meaning was I was still the songwriter, like it would still be my material, I would still have the final say, but I learned to trust the three of them so much during the process of, when you're traveling in a van together and playing in front of all these different audiences, and you see yourselves grow as a unit. You gain a lot of trust in people, not just musically but personally. And so at that point I said, yeah, let's call it something. And then of course that's a whole process. I don't know if you've ever had to name a band, but it's horrible. I wish I still had the list of everyone's ideas for band names because they were just so laughably bad. And literally everybody in the group hated everybody else's ideas. So what ended up happening is my wife at the time was just like, just name it after like a name of somebody. I was like, okay, well, what's that going to be? And we were like big South Park fans at the time, and the baby on South Park is named Ike.
Yeah.
So she was like, just call it Ike. I was like, okay. And that was it. Because the rest of our ideas were horrible. And I don't remember any of them, but like if I showed you the list, you would be like, and Ike is easy. It's 3 letters. It's much more difficult to misspell, that kind of thing.
And one of the songs off of Parallel Universe is Deathbed. And I am a big movie buff, and I am a huge fan of Orson Welles and Citizen Kane. How did the music video for that come about?
That's a cool story. Deathbed was getting regional airplay on various stations from like Baltimore. There was a radio station playing it, and there was a station in Delaware called WSTW that was playing it in regular rotation. And a guy who heard it on the radio happened to be like a filmmaker, and he just found me and sent an email and said, do you have a music video for this? Because I have an idea for it. And so this guy, Glenn Mobley, pitched me on making like an homage to Citizen Kane. I'm like, that's pretty ambitious. You sure you can pull that off? And he was like, well, we're going to need a budget. And fortunately for me and for the band at the time, we were kind of, we started our own little label, and we had sort of an angel investor, somebody who had some money, and we were like, what do you think of $10,000 to make this Citizen Kane homage? And he said yes. So we were kind of floored by that, but that's what it ended up being. And I think it's like a really, like, I look back and watch that video and I'm just floored by what he was able to accomplish. It was pretty good.
Holding a grudge can take a lifetime, and there's a lot that I got to say. I'll tell it to the world on my deathbed someday.
Then after that, you recorded your second album in real life, which is, I believe, 20, right?
Yes, it came out in 2005. That was sort of our return to recording back in our home area, because I had management, like from the John Faye Power trip into Parallel Universe, my management was in Atlanta, Georgia. So we were almost like based out of there more than we were based up here. But that relationship kind of came to its natural conclusion. So we were kind of like back to, okay, well, what's our next step? And so working with Phil Nicolo at that time was something that I had always wanted to do. He's obviously a legendary Philly producer. So we decided we would make In Real Life at his studio, Studio 4, which was a great experience. We recorded on tape, which by that point was very, very not common. Both the Caulfield's records in the 90s were done on 2-inch tape, and then after that is when kind of the Pro Tools era begins, and so everybody's making just digital recordings after that, and Phil was very adamant, like, yeah, we should do it on tape. And the crazy part about that is that there was actually like a tape shortage. like you couldn't really get blank reels of tape, so people were like recording over other tapes. But we managed to, or he, not we, managed to find a source of like blank tape reels, but they were like $300 a piece or something, and for like 9 minutes of recording. So we spent some money on that record, just on tape. But I think it was worth it. I think the album sounds really good. As you know, we recently did a reunion show during which we played that whole record. And so listening back to it with intention over the past few months has been really fun for me to just kind of recall a lot of things about the recording and just how good it sounds.
And one of the songs on it is Into Philadelphia, which has become one of your most popular songs. Can you tell the people like what that song is about and what the process was, right?
Sure. Again, another song that is rooted in a real life, again, experience. And I find that that's what happens with me. Like, it's not that often that the first idea or the seed of a song comes to me when I'm trying to make it happen. So that song is rooted in a late night drive that I took with my then infant son. It was basically in a state of delirium, but sometimes little melodies or little ideas kind of just come to you. And it kind of led to that song, which, you mentioned it was probably Ike's best known song. Again, not something I thought would ever be in that position, because it was so personal and it's so much like a little love letter to me, from me to him. But one lesson that I learned from the journey that song ended up taking is that you don't control how people interpret what you're singing. People just hear that chorus and it becomes so much less a personal thing between two people, and it becomes more about being excited or proud about the city you live in. And that's something that I didn't really anticipate would happen. But, when WMMR started playing Into Philadelphia, that was during a time when they were really heavily supporting Philadelphia artists. And, we were one of the few bands that got into like regular rotation on that station, which is a huge deal. And then from there, the song got played at like sporting events in town, like the Eagles games and the Flyers games and stuff like that. And so it just kind of like gave it this life that was never anticipated. And because WMMR has kind of kept it in its music library for 20 years, anytime there's like WMMR A to Z, it's right there in the eyes. And so it's had this life. Arguably like the longest shelf life of any song I've ever written, including anything from the Caulfields. The Devil's Diary kind of is this thing that's in the past. Like, you don't even really hear it that much, even in like 90s nostalgia stuff. But for whatever reason, Into Philadelphia is still out there. And so I call it the song that won't go away. And I'm happy about that.
And you've been playing Into Philadelphia for so many years now, and you recently, like you said, you played it at Asian American Pie 2. How has it been getting the original members of Ike back together for a reunion?
It was great. The main challenge is that our drummer lives in Georgia, so we actually only got a chance to rehearse one time as a full band for that show. The rest of us got together a couple weeks before that to just do like a quiet run through, like a refresher. But in terms of like the band being in a room and playing through the show, it happened. Well, the show happened on a Saturday. We played the rehearsal on a Thursday, and that was it. So you kind of go into it with this, well, I hope that it goes okay. You know, I think I was pretty at ease because I trust those guys so much. I mean, everybody took it really seriously. So if you're in that mindset, you're doing your homework and you're going back and you're playing along to the records and you're listening for the nuances that maybe we didn't quite nail in the quiet rehearsal. But once we did like the full rehearsal, you just run everything like 1 or 2 times and let the chips fall where they may.
And now, you know, you've done so many things after Ike, and now here you are in the present.
Yes.
And I would say that you've been so influential to so many people, including me.
Oh, thank you.
And who were the people that inspired you? Like, let's say, what is your Mount Rushmore of influential artists for you?
Wow. That's a great question. I mean, it's pretty easy to, I mean, if Mount Rushmore has, what, four faces on there? So, I mean, Lennon and McCartney have to be 2 of them. And I would say, you know, I mean, I don't know if I need to include Brian Wilson, or I don't even know if you know, it's a really tough question. I mean, I think I consider myself to be someone who has been like a student of music throughout my life. And so my tastes are extremely broad. When I was a teenager, you know, bands like The Clash and Dead Kennedys and The Jam, like those were really influential bands on me, like in my formative years. So I would, if I had to, I would definitely put Joe Strummer up there, and probably Joey Ramone. So, you know, but then there's like, honestly, when I was in high school, like my literal favorite band was the Go-Go's. So if I could extend the mountain, you know, they would be up there. In particular, the drummer, Gina Schock, because like I basically learned how to play drums playing to her parts on their records, and Stuart Copeland, and you know, so like I think that I probably have different Mount Rushmores for different aspects of my musical life, because it's different for songwriting, it's different for playing. You know, Elvis Costello is a huge influence. So it's very hard to just narrow it down to like 4 faces on a mountain.
And this question, what is more difficult, writing an amazing album or writing an amazing book?
Well, thank you for using the word amazing. That's very nice of you. The book was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, because as a songwriter, I know that I have written songs, and not bad ones, in like 30 minutes at times. This took 7 years of my life, basically. Well, maybe like 6 years. And a lifetime of experience as well. You know, with songwriting, there's a quick payoff. Like, even if you write like the bones of a song, you can kind of feel like, all right, this is going to be good. With this, it was a huge, I guess, leap of faith, if you want to call it that, to go through the process of even like, I would say from the minute I like typed the first word, and I started actually with the forward, which I don't know if was smart. Even that little chapter that starts the book took like months to do, because it's kind of like I'm blind and I'm feeling my way through a process that I don't have any experience doing. And I had to learn how to write a book as I was writing the book. And so I took in like a huge number of other memoirs, not just musician memoirs, although I did read those, like the Elvis Costello one and the Bruce Springsteen one stand out. But for me, I felt it was extremely important to read the stories of people who were A, not musicians, and B, not particularly well known, because I realized early on, like, I can't get away with the same thing that, say, Keith Richards could get away with because he's known. So how do I write a book that would appeal to a reader that doesn't have any idea who I am or what I've done in my music career or any of that? So it's a completely different like lens that I had to sort of write my story through. And that it was extremely challenging. I talk a lot these days about finding one's voice. And that was a real difficult process in figuring out, like, well, how am I going to come off in this book? And eventually, through reading a lot of other people's stories, like, the best ones are the ones where the person kind of just sounds like themselves in the telling of the story. And so that it was extremely difficult and challenging. And so, yeah, it's the answer to your question is definitely that was harder.
And so another thing you talk about in your book is growing up as an Asian American. How has that shaped your career and your music?
I think it has played a role in my career, not so much in how I've gone about what I do, but in the challenges that I've faced and how I've been perceived. I think that in a lot of ways, and I'm speaking about my experiences with the Caulfields because we were basically thrust into high exposure situations. In a lot of ways, I feel like it was challenging because people just maybe didn't know what to do with me or with a band, with a singer like me. And I feel like I don't have any regrets about anything in my career. Like, I don't second guess things, and I certainly am very happy with the way that my career has played out. So I don't have any like bitterness or anything about anything I may have experienced, which might have been, subtly racially biased or whatever, or overtly, because I feel like I'm exactly where I should be. I feel like the 2025 version of me is just much better equipped at handling those challenges than maybe I was when I was in my 20s. But I think the thing that I'm happiest about is that I can tell my story and be an example of someone of my heritage who has, like, you look at what I've achieved, like, it's not deniable. It can't be spun as anything other than, like, I did it and I persisted through a lot of challenges. We all have challenges, so I'm not saying that mine are harder or easier than anybody else's, but it is a unique story in my opinion, and one that I love getting the opportunity to share because I know for a fact, from the events that I've done, you attended one, there's always somebody out there who needs to hear it, who needs to see that it can be done by someone that looks like them.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that brings me the most satisfaction. And I think that it's kind of cool, like, this book is already 2 years old, and I still feel like I'm just ramping up, like, what I'm doing with it. You know, I mean, I've done in the neighborhood of 20 different school events since the book came out, and I'm looking to do more all the time. And, you know, I have a big one booked for this fall in Delaware at a school. And so it's been very, very satisfying for me to almost create like a new parallel track for me to be a creative person. Like, I still obviously make records and do music shows and that kind of thing, but doing my book presentations, which are obviously still incorporate music, is just a really fun way to be creative now at this late stage.
And how has the success of your most recent album, The Long Game, been?
Very happy with it. It's been great to, this is my first album in a while where I've had a partnership in releasing it. So it's released on ITP Entertainment, which is my friend Dave Osikinen, who plays drums in the Hooters. Mm-hmm. It's his company. It's his, I guess you could call it a little label. And so to kind of have more of a team around what I'm doing, as opposed to like, it's just me, I still do a lot of work. Like, I'm still my own booking agent. I'm still my own, you know, social media manager, web manager, etc. But to have that little extra help and support has been great. And, you know, the single, Asking for a Friend, had a really long run on AAA radio nationally. And we're very, very excited about that. So it's really just, for me, it's about, I just want to be out there sharing that music. And I think I've played more shows this year than in quite a few of the most recent previous years. Like, I'm just kind of like always doing something.
And so for the final question, what would be your advice to any up-and-coming musicians or songwriters trying to start a career in music?
That's always like the toughest question. And I don't know that I have any one piece of advice, because everybody's career trajectory takes a different path. Mm-hmm. I guess all I'll say is really ask yourself why you want it to be your career. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people get into more traditional careers for very pragmatic reasons. Like, they want to make a living. They want to buy a house. Those are not things that can be your main driver when getting into a creative career. Like, you have to feel like you don't have a choice. You have to feel like, if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it my entire life. And you have to be willing to accept certain realities. I live a very minimalist lifestyle. You know, I don't have a lot of the, I guess, or seek out a lot of the creature comforts that a lot of people seek out, especially when they're, you know, getting into certain careers. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to really want to do it because you feel this fire within yourself that says, I have to do this. So I don't know if that's advice. It's just, you know, I'm just trying to like weed out the weak. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have the stomach to like eat potatoes for dinner, then it's going to be hard. You know, I realize that we live in a time when, you know, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very high percentage of people from your generation that's like their career, most desired career is to be an influencer of some kind.
Right.
And what's the percentage of people that ever get to like really make a living off of that?
Right.
Like doing a creative, I mean, arguably, I guess that's creative, but doing something like music or being an author or a playwright or a filmmaker or any of that, like that stuff is hard to get a footing in career-wise. And you have to be dedicated to your craft. You have to be willing to hear the word no a lot. If you have this sort of skin for it, then you should do it. But if it's to, if you're getting into it because you're coveting how much money Billie Eilish makes or Taylor Swift makes or any of that, it's a recipe for disaster.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great
I
to
really
end on a
appreciate it.
positive note.